Hello, special educators, and happy spring. I cannot believe that we are here in May already, our last SPED department meeting of the school year. It's gone way too quickly. And I know that this is a really busy and sometimes chaotic feeling time of year. So, just starting with a little bit of gratitude for you creating some space to hear these updates and come together as a team with your special services supervisor at SPED department meetings in the upcoming week to hear these important pieces of information and have some dialogue as a group because it is important, but I also know that you're extremely busy. So I'm very grateful for you taking the time to listen to this information and plan for some next steps. Our first item this month is just a reminder about SPED curriculum ordering. So we need to make sure that as we're heading into the next school year, we have an accurate count of materials and for what we have and what we need. It's just very essential for that planning and preparedness. So having a process in the building helps us avoid last minute ordering and any kind of scrambling at the beginning of the school year. So with that, we have a template here for ordering curricular materials. Please note this is optional. You don't have to use this tool, but it's designed to help you plan and order those materials for the start of the school year. So we're asking that you work to determine how many students will be in each class for trans math and language live, and how many materials are maybe needed to support those classes. You can make a copy of that linked document for your building and put all the information in there. And then determine who in your building is going to take the lead on ordering materials. And you can see the cost estimate outlines here for both trans math, so the quotes there, as well as for language materials. So those are all linked in here for you to review as you're making those orders. So just to be clear here, the template is optional to use. You don't have to use it, but we do have to identify a lead and get these materials ordered for buildings for the following school year. So everything's there and ready to roll by the time that students get to school. All right. Next item is Brightspace and registration. So we kicked this off with you last month. Thanks to all of you who started your accounts. Thank you to all of you who submitted help desk tickets. We had some bugs to work out in the system, and I think we're through that part of the process now, but your feedback was really helpful in us solving those problems. So we're now in the process of getting registered for August professional learning. And that's really important so that we know who's coming to what training. Some trainings involve food ordering, some trainings involve material ordering. So having your registration before you leave for summer break is extremely important. So that's really what we're asking you to do and to focus on here is that course registration. So please review the 2023-24 PL course registration guidance here if you have questions about what courses you need to register for based on your role. Then you'll go into the Brightspace system. So I'm in here as a learner. And you are going to get in and get registered for all of your courses. So you would do that through that Discover feature, looking for those courses that are listed based on your role. I'm already enrolled in everything, so that's why I don't see anything here. If you see courses in Discover, that probably means you haven't registered yet. Once I am in a course, so I'm going to go to the Unique Learners Conference. This introduction section is where I get access to that registration form. Please note you're going to see some templated language in some of these sections in the introduction. We are building all of this from scratch, so just be patient with us as content gets built out here. If it looks maybe somewhat incomplete, that's because we're still working on some of those pieces behind the scenes and really getting acclimated to the different parts of the system on our end too. But this course registration page you see here is your most important page. This is where we're going to get all that information. You submit that survey, and that's all you need to do at this point. Here's an example. This page isn't completed yet, but it will be ahead of the course. actually starting. So by day one of ULC, that information will all be in there. So just know that content's going to be available to you when you need it. And the system does provide you notifications and alerts. I'll show you what that looks like really quickly via this notification icon, this bell up in your navigation bar, and via your email. So just know that as course announcements occur or information is released, you will get notified of that. No need to do anything with these courses until you receive instructions to do so or until you are at the professional learning event. Varies depending on what the opportunity is. What else did I want to cover here? Just again, reminder, paraprofessional annual training is going to be in your buildings again this year. We've got that plan that we're working on for you. It's going to be very familiar, no major changes to what you're used to there. But if you haven't and you want on-site support for paraprofessional annual training, please fill out this request. Again, we just would want that done before you leave for the school year so that we can plan accordingly. So as you're together as a team, take a minute, make sure you're all registered for what you need to be registered for, and let your SSS know of any questions. So big takeaways: register before you leave and submit that paraprofessional annual training on-site support request before you leave. Want to touch briefly on the collaborative planning process for next year. So we're going to be continuing this process as we have in years past to fund projects aligned to high leverage practices for students with disabilities. So if you have anything that you want to be doing in this regard over the summer, we're extending the deadline to accept those requests to June 5th. So for example, maybe your team wants to meet to revamp some of your behavior programming in your building. That would be a great use of these funds. Maybe your team wants to meet for another purpose to design some professional learning in your building or when staff come back. That would be a great use of these funds. So just know that you can submit those requests. The Google form for submitting is linked here for you. And if you want more details about the type of projects that that our collaborative planning funds that those dollars fund, you can look at this admin procedure number 6 that helps outline all of the details for you. CEUs, quick note, back to the Brightspace topic, that all CEUs are going to be transferring into that Brightspace for any future professional learning opportunities. We're not going to pull in your current CEUs that you've earned through Scred into the system, but anything you start earning this coming August moving forward, all of your CEUs will be automatically generated and accessible within Brightspace. If you need a list of the CEUs you've earned so far for updating your license, feel free to email the help desk at scred.k12.mn.us for that request, and we'll get that to you. It'll be kept in an archive format for future years, but we want to make sure that we get those to you if that would be helpful for you. Oh, maybe they are. I think they are actually being transferred over into Brightspace. I think I'm getting that a little bit mixed up. But just know that you can get a list right now as you need it. Okay, documentation of opting out of statewide testing. So why is this necessary? We're in testing season right now. So I acknowledge that some of this is going to be most relevant this coming school year as we come back to the table as IEP teams to think about what students need for statewide testing. We're going to come back to this topic in August, but due to some changes, it's important we talk about it now too. So there have been a number of recent inquiries regarding statewide testing, allowable accommodations and modifications, as well as the role of the IEP team. In addition, SPED Forms has added a new feature of the testing page of the IEP that allows teams to indicate when parents have opted out in writing for state testing. So that button is now there. That didn't used to be on the IEP page, but it is now. So why it's important for us to talk about this is opting out of state assessments is not an IEP team decision. And so with that on the IEP page now, I can see where that would get a little bit confusing. So it's important that we are clear. Unless a parent opts out on their own volition and provides written documentation to that extent, this option should not be selected. So parent rights for their child to not participate in that state testing. And when I say state testing, I'm talking about the MCA and the MTAS. That is separate from an IEP team decision. So it's important that the IEP team is clear that their role is to determine which state assessment is appropriate, the MTAS or the MCA, and what, if any, accommodations are needed. So we have more guidance around that consideration on CMR, including MTAS eligibility, because there is eligibility requirements for students to take the MTAS. But I just think it's really important that that is clear. If the IEP team then, let's say you are as a team informed that a parent has opted out, but the parent later decides to opt back in, the team would then need to amend the IEP for any necessary accommodations if they're not already listed in the IEP. So those are just things to consider as you are using this, this page as a team. If a parent asks about, well, should I opt my child out of testing? Again, I want the IEP team to be very clear. That is your choice. All students have the right to access this testing. Our job as the IEP team is to decide which test is appropriate and how best to give them equitable access to that test. You need to decide if that's something that you want to do as a parent or not. So I just want to make sure you don't have to present the parent with an opportunity to consider opting out. You really just need to talk about which test the IEP team thinks is appropriate and which accommodations are appropriate. 'Tis the season for building to building transition. So item 6 is around that topic. And, some of these meetings are already happening. Some occurred maybe earlier this spring, or some will be scheduled soon. And it's really important that as a system, we work together to ensure a smooth process for students, parents, and the sending and receiving schools. So we wanted to provide a little bit of information here about transitions. If you click on the link in item 6, it'll take you to CMR with some more information. But having those transition meetings for students with disabilities is really important, whether it's from preschool to kindergarten, from elementary to middle school to high school to transition, whatever it might be. Those meetings are really important. And in those meetings, the current case manager is reviewing that student's IEP, while members of that receiving team, in hearing that information, looking at that information, they're communicating recommended changes based on that next system. And considering, from moving from elementary to middle school, does something need to change? From moving from preschool to kindergarten, what looks different? And there are a lot of changes sometimes that need to be made in that regard. And sometimes there's not many at all. It depends on the needs of the student. So members of that receiving team, that's where they really come in to describe what that new setting looks like and what might need to be considered. And information about the student and their strengths and their interests also gets communicated at that time. After the transition meeting, the student's current case manager uses the notes from that meeting and any guidance provided to amend the student's IEP before the current school year. And the reason that that is so important is because we have to get parental consent for those changes before the first day of school. Before we are implementing that new plan, we have to give parents that 14 days to consider and that opportunity to consent or disagree, or to allow for that passive consent to go into place. So we use a notice of team meeting. And then if changes are necessary, we follow that amendment procedure. I know that some other teams might use other strategies for inviting parents to transition meetings. Just really important that that notification of that meeting gets made, and that if we're following that after a meeting, we use that procedure A in amendment. But if the student has maybe already had an IEP meeting, you've maybe already done all of this too. So we need to just make sure that we're using that form or that process. And I'll just again refer to what Amendment A is when that partial team gets convened. Sometimes a parent doesn't want to meet as part of a transition meeting. That's okay. Again, we can seek their permission to get any input and amend the IEP outside of a meeting and send that home again for their consideration. Quick note about students who are transitioning to 18 to 21-year-old programs. As part of that transition meeting, it's really important to discuss graduation requirements for those students and really make sure that the graduation plan that's documented for each student is appropriate and in alignment with their needs. And this might be a time where the team decides to make some adjustments there depending on where the student's at and where they need to go. So use the receiving program, those transition program staff, to really dialogue around this piece, as ultimately they'll be the ones responsible for meeting those graduation requirements and determining when the student will actually receive their diploma. So that collaboration around that topic is really critical. And also remember that students can't accept their diploma if they're attending those programs. They can absolutely and should walk and participate in the graduation ceremony with their senior class. I know some buildings create a certificate of completion that goes in the folder for their diploma. So they're still receiving something just like any other student, but what's inside might look different. But they cannot receive their diploma until they complete the transition program. Regarding transition, if something I said in this meeting doesn't necessarily match your local process, that's something to connect with your special services supervisor about, because I know every district has a little bit of a different process, but these are some of the key elements to think about. All right. Last, reflecting on the year. So I think sometimes when we talk about, hey, let's spend some time reflecting, especially when we're really busy, that could really trigger an eye roll or two, or lead to frustration because there's a lot to be done. So let's not take time reflecting. And I can very much appreciate that perspective. At the same time, reflection is a really critical tool for us as educators and for us as leaders in knowing where to move forward in the next year. That reflection provides us a lot of valuable information. And in thinking about closing out this agenda and this department meeting process this year, I came across this quote from the Harvard Business Review. And I'm going to read it because it's really important and these aren't my words. At its simplest, reflection is about careful thought. But the kind of reflection that is really valuable to leaders is more nuanced than that. The most useful reflection involves the conscious consideration and analysis of beliefs and actions for the purpose of learning. Reflection gives the brain an opportunity to pause amidst the chaos, untangle and sort through observations and experiences, consider multiple possible interpretations, and create meaning. This meaning becomes learning, which can then inform future mindsets and actions. For leaders, this meaning making is crucial to their ongoing growth and development. So as special education leaders at Scred, we do really value this time to pause and reflect. I loved that pause amidst the chaos, and I think we can all relate to that in one degree or another. Because we want to continue learning and growing as a collaborative system for the benefit of all of our learners. And as we reflect on this year, on behalf of everyone at Scred, I just want to sincerely thank you for your partnership, for your dedication and commitment to the work, and with the remaining weeks ahead, really encourage you to tap into your passion, to your purpose, and finish the year strong. I am so grateful to be able to serve as your director of special education, and it's very bittersweet bringing this last department meeting of the year to you today, knowing that I'm transitioning into a new role next year. But that doesn't mean I won't continue to lead and serve you as special educators in our system, because nothing means more to me in my work. So with that, thank you. And there are some questions that we want you to be thinking through and dialoguing around when your special services supervisor is at the table. And again, what we learn from you in this reflection that we'll create space for is going to really help us as leaders, again, create some meaning, inform our mindsets and our actions for the future, and continue to learn and grow together. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Happy spring, and we'll see you soon.